You really have no excuse, but if you haven't read chapter 1, it's because you didn't have the book. For those of you who do have a book, and that's it wrapped up until this morning, shame on you. You should have read chapter 1. That's what we're going to cover today, and hopefully have fun with this. And let me just give you a heads up. Next Tuesday is chapter 2, dealing with the progression of religion from primitive to the mythological era. And we're going to do that in one setting, and then get into the real fun stuff. So go ahead and read chapter 2 for next Tuesday, and be ready to participate in class. You'll notice that I told you Tuesday that this is really informative religion, but I am compelled by the syllabus, by my supervisor, and the college catalog, keep this title, Comparative Religions. But again, we're not comparing religions. We're being informed about so that we can make an intelligent choice about. So let's get into the whole issue today of religion in prehistoric and primary cultures. Science postulates that humans have been active on Earth for at least 1 million years. But you know, we only know a tiny fraction of human history. It wasn't until, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago that Homo sapiens used writing. And although non-written sources, such as cave paintings, burial sites, religious statuary, and archaeological remains are available to us, that's what we have prior to the written history to indicate human culture and religious experiences. But I want to stress this. Our strongest source of knowledge is the written record of the total time period that people have been on Earth. We have written records chronicling less than 1% of that time. And from these records that we have, we know a great deal about different cultures and religious experiences, but there is much that we do not know, and in all honesty, cannot know. It is virtually impossible to say when people became religious. For example, we know next to nothing about primitive religion. Unless you are an anomaly, none of us were there as eyewitnesses to the event. So none of us can see the world through the eyes of our prehistoric ancestors. We can study their cave paintings. We can study their implements. We can study the disposition of their bodies and artifacts in their burial sites. But concerning primitive religions, folks, the best we can do is make conjectures. A conjecture is a best guess estimate as to what might have been. And I stress that word, what might have been, because we cannot know for sure. And we need to realize, too, that these conjectures are extremely risky. They raise more questions than they provide answers for. And if we could find answers to those questions, they might help us determine when and how religion truly began. At present, all that we know or think we know about prehistoric and primal cultures comes through two disciplines, anthropology and archaeology. You will want to remember those two words. You will probably see that question on an exam.
Anthropology and what?
Anthropology and archaeology. But understand, as scientific as these disciplines are, they are limited. And the knowledge gained through them is speculative at best. There is more disagreement than agreement among the authorities of these two disciplines as to what the evidence they've unearthed means. What one investigator calls a temple, another may call a stable. So controversy and mistakes within these two disciplines are too numerous to mention. Therefore, we cautiously, and I emphasize this, cautiously give anthropology and archaeology its due and no more. For example, the earliest hominid for whom much evidence to be identified with religious remains is the Neanderthal man. Now, the Neanderthal may have been the first, but we cannot know for certain, for their immediate predecessors did not leave behind a great deal of evidence. So let's start with the Old Stone Age. The Neanderthal people who flourished from 230,000 down to 30,000 years ago, over an area stretching from southern Spain, over here, all the way across over to even to Israel. They're thought to be a separate species who were replaced by Homo sapiens. And although they were anatomically similar to the modern Homo sapien, skeletal remains reveal that these hominids were somewhat shorter in height and more muscular. Up with me? Okay. And we can always go back if I can figure out how to work this machine. To date, there are more than 100 sites of Neanderthal life that have been excavated. And the neat thing about these sites is it reveals these folks were clever workers with tools. They used tools made of bone, of stone, and wood. And they also show how the Neanderthal buried their dead. And it's these burial sites that furnish the earliest clear evidence of religious practice in the Old Stone Age. Some of the dead were given very careful burial, which seems to indicate a veneration for the dead. And alongside the bodies, usually arranged in a crouching or fetal position, there were often food offerings and flint implements, hand axes, awls, hide scrapers, perhaps as an offering to the gods, or perhaps as necessary accompaniments into the world of the dead. It is speculated that these implements were intended to serve the dead in an afterlife. That may be a concept that some of us have difficulty wrapping our minds around. Let's see if one of these will work. Their concept of life after death, if you will. Let's think about this. Every one of you sitting here today has already died one time. What do I mean by that? Someone want to venture a guess? Reincarnation? No. Well, reincarnation, yes, but that's not what I'm getting at. You've already died one time. Go ahead.
I was going to say something like religious-wise, when you get reborn.
Okay.
Do that, or
Good answer, but not all of us have had that experience, so this is something that includes every one of us. What?
Doesn't it have something to do with some people believe that your soul has to die a certain amount of time before it's a complete being?
Nope. Here it is. And I'm not an artist, please.
Not in the soul, nothing to do with the body.